The restaurant was buzzing with the sound of clinking glasses, plates being stacked, and conversations weaving through the warm air. It was the kind of evening that made every table full and every staff member run from one end of the dining floor to the other. In the middle of all this movement, no one noticed that one of the new trainees was not who he seemed to be. Dressed in a plain black shirt and simple apron, the man moved clumsily between tables, trying to carry dishes without letting his nervous hands give away the truth. He was not really a new worker. He was the owner, the very CEO of the restaurant chain. For years, he had built his company into a name known across the city. People praised the food, the atmosphere, and the service, but he had a feeling that somewhere along the line, he had lost touch with the heartbeat of the business, the people who worked tirelessly every day. Sitting in meetings, looking at charts, and signing contracts no longer gave him the answers he needed. He wanted to understand his employees, not just as names on a payroll, but as real human beings with struggles, dreams, and stories of their own. That was why he decided to go undercover. The disguise was simple but effective. Gone was the tailored suit and shiny watch that usually marked his presence. In their place, he wore second-hand shoes, a cheap wristwatch, and a worn apron tied loosely around his waist. His hair was slightly messy, and a pair of glasses he did not need sat on the bridge of his nose. No one could recognize him this way, not even his managers, who often shook his hand in polished conference rooms. Here, on the restaurant floor, he was invisible, a beginner, a nobody, just another pair of hands added to the team. The first day was harder than he expected. Carrying heavy trays, wiping down tables quickly enough before new guests arrived, and memorizing orders tested his patience. His back ached, and sweat rolled down his face, but he did not complain. He reminded himself that this was the daily life of the people who worked for him, and they managed to do it day after day with no break from reality. Among the staff, one face stood out to him. A young woman named Maria, who worked as a waitress, moved with quiet grace across the dining floor. She was not the loudest, nor the most confident, but there was something steady and calm about her. When customers were impatient, she smiled with gentleness that seemed to calm them down. When her co-workers struggled with extra work, she silently stepped in to help, never asking for credit. She kept her hair tied neatly back and wore the same pair of slightly faded shoes every day, but her posture carried dignity, as though she refused to let hardship bend her spirit. The undercover CEO noticed that while others found moments to laugh and chat in the staff room, Maria often kept to herself. She finished her meals quickly and returned to work without wasting time. He saw her lingering around tables long after customers had left, making sure every glass was clean, every crumb wiped, and every chair pushed into place. Even when the shift ended, she was the last one to leave, double-checking small details that most would ignore. He grew curious. Who was this woman who worked so quietly, yet so tirelessly? She seemed younger than some of the other waitresses, but there was a weight in her eyes that spoke of responsibility. That night, after the restaurant closed, he noticed something unusual. Maria walked into the kitchen, where leftover bread sat in baskets, still warm but unsold. Most staff either ignored it or occasionally took a small piece for themselves, but Maria did something different. She wrapped several pieces carefully in napkins, slipped them into a small bag she carried, and held it close as if guarding something precious. Then, without a word, she hurried out into the night. The undercover boss stood frozen, watching her leave. At first, a thought crossed his mind: was she stealing? Company rules did not allow staff to take food without permission. But something in her cautious movements, the way her shoulders tensed as though she feared being caught, and the tenderness with which she packed the bread told him there was more to the story. Over the next few days, he kept observing. Each evening, as the restaurant emptied and silence settled over the once busy space, Maria repeated the same ritual. She never took more than a modest amount, always wrapping the bread neatly, as if she valued it more than most people would. The undercover CEO could not stop thinking about it. In his world, Bread was something served endlessly at every table, something so ordinary it often went to waste. Yet in Maria's hands, those simple pieces looked like treasures, like survival. One evening, as he struggled to balance a tray of drinks, Maria came to his rescue. She steadied the tray with a quick smile and whispered, "Don't worry, you'll get the hang of it." Her kindness caught him off guard. Here she was, exhausted from a long shift, yet still willing to encourage a new trainee who couldn't even hold a tray properly. He thanked her, but her words lingered in his heart longer than he expected. By the end of the week, he felt he was beginning to see the soul of his company through Maria. Her hard work, quiet resilience, and mysterious actions with the bread pulled him into her story. He realized that while he had come here to observe the workplace, he was now observing something deeper: the hidden lives of his employees that never showed up in quarterly reports. And each night, as Maria walked out with her small bag held close, he felt the pull of curiosity grow stronger. He wanted to know why. He wanted to know who waited for her at home, and what role those pieces of bread played in her life. He had come undercover to find problems in his business, but what he was discovering in Maria was far more human, far more powerful. Something about her, about the secrets she carried silently, was about to change everything for him. The following week felt different for the Undercover CEO. What started as a simple experiment to understand his employees had now turned into a journey of curiosity about one particular waitress. Maria had unknowingly drawn his attention in a way no one else had. Her quiet determination and her mysterious habit of taking bread home made him wonder more about her life. Every shift he worked, he found himself watching her more closely, not in a way that disturbed her, but in small observations. He noticed the way she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear when she was nervous. He noticed how she never lost patience, even when customers were unkind or demanding. He saw how she took extra shifts when other staff members wanted to go home early. Maria was the kind of worker every business owner dreamed of, yet she carried herself with such humility that no one would ever know how much she gave to the job. One night, after an exhausting dinner rush, the CEO lingered in the kitchen longer than usual. The smell of roasted chicken and baked bread still hung in the air, though most of it had already been cleared. He wiped the counters slowly, pretending to be busy, while keeping an eye on Maria. Just as he expected, she walked toward the bread basket once again. She picked up a few pieces, wrapped them carefully, and placed them into her bag. There was no hesitation in her movement, only a kind of routine, as if she had done this countless times before. That was when the CEO's suspicion turned into a question he could no longer ignore. Why bread? Why not take other leftovers like meat or soup? Why was it always bread, and why so carefully wrapped? The next evening, his curiosity grew stronger. After Maria left, he decided to follow her quietly. He felt a little guilty after all. He was intruding into her personal life, but something inside him told him that her story mattered. Pulling his cap lower to hide his face, he kept a safe distance as she walked down the street. The path she took was not toward the busier parts of town. Instead, she headed toward a quieter neighborhood, where the buildings looked old and worn down. The streetlights flickered, and cracked sidewalks showed signs of neglect. It was a part of the city most wealthy people never stepped foot in. Maria's pace quickened as she reached a small apartment building with peeling paint and broken windows. She slipped inside, carrying her bag close to her chest. The CEO stood across the street, watching silently, his heart heavy with questions. The next day, he couldn't concentrate at work. He fumbled orders, spilled water on a table, and even dropped a fork in front of a customer. His mind was elsewhere inside that small apartment building, wondering what Maria's life looked like once the restaurant lights went off. Finally, he decided he couldn't just wonder anymore. The following night, when Maria finished her shift and repeated her routine, he followed her again, this time stepping closer. He waited outside the apartment building until the light in one of the windows flickered on. Through the thin curtain, he caught a glimpse of a small room with mismatched furniture. Inside, Maria placed the bread on the table. What he saw next brought a lump to his throat. A boy, maybe 10 years old, rushed over, his face lighting up at the sight of the bread. He broke off a piece and handed it to a little girl, no older than 6. Behind them, lying on a worn-out couch, was a frail woman who looked much older than her years. Maria handed her mother a piece of bread with gentle care, as if she were giving her something precious. It became clear in that moment. Maria wasn't stealing out of greed, she was surviving out of necessity. The bread wasn't for her alone. It was for her family. It was their dinner, their comfort, their hope in the middle of hardship. The CEO stepped back, his chest tightening. He had spent years building a business empire, attending charity galas, and signing big checks to causes he barely understood. Yet here, in this tiny apartment, he saw the true face of need. It wasn't statistics on a report or figures in a donation ledger, it was a waitress, her siblings, and her sick mother trying to make it through one more night. The next morning, he arrived at work earlier than usual. He felt different. He wasn't just an undercover boss anymore. He was a man carrying a secret, a story that no one else in the restaurant knew. Every time he looked at Maria now, he saw her not just as a worker, but as a daughter, a sister, and a quiet hero who bore the weight of responsibility without complaint. Later that day, one of the managers scolded Maria lightly for being late to her shift. She apologized quickly, bowing her head, though she had only been late by a few minutes. The CEO, still in disguise, clenched his jaw. He knew why she was late, because she had likely been taking care of her family before running to work. He wanted to speak up for her, to defend her, but he held back. His undercover identity wouldn't allow him to reveal what he knew just yet. That night, the CEO lay awake in his small rented apartment that he used for his undercover stay. His mind replayed the scene in Maria's home over and over again. He thought about the boy's smile when he saw the bread, the little girl's laughter, and the mother's tired eyes filled with gratitude. Something stirred in him, something he hadn't felt in years. It was a mix of compassion, responsibility, and admiration for a young woman who gave everything she had to the people she loved. The following shifts became harder for him. Not because of the physical labor, but because of the emotional weight he carried. He began to notice the little sacrifices Maria made that others overlooked. She often skipped her staff meal, pretending she wasn't hungry, when in reality, she was saving every bit of food she could for her family. She never asked for favors, never complained about long hours, and never once mentioned the struggles she faced outside the restaurant walls. The CEO realized that his undercover mission was no longer just about improving his company. It had become personal. Maria's life had opened his eyes to a reality he had ignored for too long: the unseen battles of the people who kept his business alive. And he knew, deep down, that this discovery was only the beginning of something much bigger. The days rolled into weeks, and the undercover CEO found himself more and more connected to the restaurant staff, not as their boss, but as one of them. Yet no matter how many new skills he learned or how many tables he served, his mind kept circling back to Maria. She had become the quiet center of his focus, not because she sought attention, but because she avoided it. In her silence, he saw strength. In her struggles, he saw a story that most people would never notice. One evening, during a particularly busy shift, Maria nearly collapsed from exhaustion. The restaurant was packed with customers, and every worker was running back and forth to keep up with orders. While serving a heavy tray of food to a large family, Maria stumbled slightly, her face pale and her steps shaky. The undercover CEO quickly rushed to help her steady the tray before it could crash to the floor. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his voice low enough so the customers wouldn't hear. Maria forced a smile, nodding quickly. "Yes, just tired." "Thank you." But he could see the truth in her eyes. She was not just tired, she was worn out. There was a weight on her shoulders that no break room coffee or 10-minute rest could fix. After the shift ended, most workers left chatting and laughing, glad to finally breathe. Maria, however, quietly began cleaning tables again, even though her shift was officially over. The undercover CEO stayed back too, pretending to wipe the counters. He wanted to ask her why she worked so hard, but the words felt heavy on his tongue. Instead, he simply watched her move slowly, her hands trembling slightly from fatigue. That night, when she slipped bread into her bag as usual, his heart ached. He knew now that this bread was not a luxury, but a necessity. Her family depended on it. The following weekend, the CEO decided to test his growing suspicion. He asked Maria, in his trainee role, if she wanted to join the rest of the staff for a late-night meal after work. A few of them had invited him, eager to include the new guy in their group. Maria smiled politely but shook her head. "No, thank you. I have to get home," she said softly. He noticed she never joined them, not once. While others spent their extra earnings on small pleasures, a new shirt, a drink after work, or even a taxi ride home, Maria never allowed herself those little comforts. Every choice she made seemed to circle back to sacrifice. One rainy evening, as the CEO once again followed her discreetly from the restaurant to her neighborhood, he saw something that hit him harder than before. Maria walked into a small pharmacy, speaking softly to the pharmacist. He couldn't hear the conversation from outside, but he noticed her body language, her hesitant hands, the way she opened her small wallet, and the way her shoulders slumped when she was told the price. After a moment, she shook her head and walked out without buying anything. He realized then that her mother's illness was not just a passing sickness. It was something serious, something that required medicine they could barely afford. And Maria, despite working long hours, was barely managing to keep her family afloat. The CEO's heart grew heavier with each discovery. He had spent his life surrounded by comfort, never once worrying about whether there would be food on his table or medicine for his health. Yet here was Maria, juggling two worlds: the world of smiling service at the restaurant, and the world of quiet suffering at home. The more he saw, the harder it became to keep his secret. He wanted to step in, to tell her that she wasn't alone anymore, that help was closer than she thought. But revealing himself too early would break the entire purpose of his undercover mission. He needed to understand her life fully before he could act. One day, during a short break, he found Maria sitting alone near the back door of the restaurant. The air outside was cool, and she was staring at the ground, lost in thought. He sat down beside her, unsure of what to say. "You work really hard," he said gently. She smiled faintly, still looking down. "Everyone here works hard. But you, more than most," he pressed carefully. Maria finally looked at him, her eyes tired but kind. "Sometimes you don't have a choice. You just do what you have to do." The CEO nodded, his chest tightening. Her words were simple, but they carried years of untold struggle. In the following weeks, he began noticing more details. Maria's shoes had tiny holes in them, worn thin from endless walking. Her uniform, though always clean, was patched at the seams. He even noticed that she avoided turning down extra shifts, no matter how tired she looked, because every extra hour meant a few more coins to bring home. The turning point came one stormy night. The rain was pouring heavily, and the staff rushed to leave quickly before the streets flooded. Maria, as usual, was the last to go. She carried her small bag with bread inside, her shoulders hunched against the storm. The undercover CEO followed, but this time, as she reached her building, he saw her trip slightly on the wet sidewalk. Her bag fell, and the bread tumbled out, getting soaked in the dirty rainwater. Maria froze, staring at the ruined bread. For a moment, her face crumbled. He saw the tears she tried so hard to hide. She picked up the soggy pieces anyway, holding them tightly to her chest, as if even ruined bread still mattered. That image stayed in his mind all night, burning into his heart. It was then he realized the depth of her struggle. Bread to him was nothing. Bread to her was everything. That night, lying awake in his small undercover apartment, he felt an ache unlike anything he had known. He admired her strength, but he also felt a deep responsibility. How could he, a man of wealth and privilege, stand by while someone like Maria carried the world on her shoulders alone? He knew then that he would not remain silent much longer. The undercover role had given him a window into her life, and what he saw was not just the story of a hard-working waitress, but of a silent fighter. A daughter. A sister. A caretaker. A woman holding her family together with her bare hands. And though he had come undercover to find flaws in his business, what he had discovered instead was the truth of humanity's sacrifice, resilience, and the quiet power of love. The undercover CEO knew the time for silence was ending. Each passing day, the weight of what he had learned about Maria grew heavier in his heart. He could not keep pretending to be a clumsy trainee forever. He had seen enough. He had felt enough. And more than anything, he knew he had to act before Maria's quiet struggle broke her completely. The decision to reveal himself was not easy. He lay awake for nights, torn between keeping his disguise and stepping forward with the truth. What if she felt betrayed, knowing he had followed her home and watched her life from a distance? What if she thought he pitied her? The last thing he wanted was to wound her pride. Yet he could not remain in the shadows, watching her carry a burden she did not deserve to carry alone. One evening, after another long shift, he finally made his choice. The restaurant had closed, and most of the staff had already gone home. Maria was in the corner, wiping down the last table with her usual care. Her movements were slow, tired, but steady. She had that same calm determination that had first caught his attention weeks ago. He took a deep breath, walked over, and softly said, "Maria, can I talk to you for a moment?" She looked up, surprised. "Of course," she replied gently, setting down the cloth. For a moment, he could not find the right words. He had spoken at countless business meetings, stood on stages, and addressed hundreds of people without fear, but here, standing before one humble waitress, his throat felt dry. "There's something I need to tell you," he began carefully. "I haven't been honest about who I really am." Maria tilted her head, confused. "What do you mean? You're the new trainee, aren't you?" He shook his head slowly, removing the glasses that were part of his disguise. "No, Maria. I'm not. My name is Daniel. I am the CEO of this restaurant chain." The words hung in the air like heavy stones. Maria froze, staring at him in disbelief. For a long moment, silence wrapped around them, broken only by the faint hum of the lights overhead. Her eyes widened, her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Finally, she whispered, You're the owner." "Yes," he said softly, his voice filled with both shame and sincerity. "I came here undercover because I wanted to understand how things truly worked on the ground. I wanted to see what my employees go through every day. That's why I worked beside you. That's why I've been here." Maria blinked, still trying to process the truth. "So all this time, you were watching us?" "Yes," he admitted. "And in that time, I saw something in you that I will never forget. I saw how hard you work, how much you give, and how much you sacrifice. I saw the way you take care of everyone else, even when you have nothing left for yourself." Her cheeks flushed, and she looked down at the floor. "You followed me home, didn't you?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. His heart tightened. "Yes," he said honestly. "I did. I know it was wrong to invade your privacy, but I couldn't help it. I had to understand. I saw your family. I saw your little brother and sister, and your mother. And I saw how you carry the weight of all of them on your shoulders." Tears welled in Maria's eyes, and she turned away, covering her face with her hands. Shame filled her chest. She had tried so hard to keep her life private, to hold on to dignity, but now her secret was exposed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to break the rules. I just I couldn't let them go hungry. The CEO stepped closer, his voice firm yet gentle. Maria, don't apologize. You have nothing to be ashamed of. What you've done is not wrong, it's love. You are doing what any good daughter and sister would do. You are a hero in ways most people can't even imagine. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'm not a hero. I'm just trying to survive. And that, he said softly, is exactly why you are extraordinary. For the first time since he had met her, Maria allowed herself to cry freely. The walls she had built around her heart cracked open, and years of silent struggle poured out in her tears. Daniel wanted to reach out and comfort her, but he gave her space, letting her release the weight she had carried alone for so long. After a few minutes, she wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. So what happens now? Are you going to fire me? The question broke him. Fire her? The thought had never crossed his mind. In fact, it was the opposite. No, Maria, he said firmly. The last thing I would ever do is fire you. I don't just see you as an employee anymore. I see you as someone who has reminded me of what this company should stand for. You've shown me strength, courage, and compassion in a way no one else ever has. Maria looked at him, still unsure. But why tell me all this? Because, Daniel admitted, his voice filled with emotion, you've changed me. When I came here, I was just a businessman looking at numbers and charts. But you've made me see the people behind those numbers. You've opened my eyes to the struggles I never truly understood. And I can't just walk away from that. I won't. Her lips trembled, and she looked down again, overwhelmed by his words. He continued, I want to help you, Maria. Not just with money, but with real support. For your mother's treatment, for your siblings' education, for your future. You shouldn't have to carry this all alone anymore. Maria's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever offered her help like this before. She had grown used to fighting her battles in silence, believing that no one cared. Yet here was the man who owned the very restaurant she worked in, offering her a lifeline. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Don't say anything, Daniel replied gently. Just let me do what I should have done from the beginning, take care of the people who take care of this company. The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence was not heavy. It was filled with a new kind of warmth, a connection built on truth and compassion. Maria still felt unsure, still felt vulnerable, but for the first time in years, she felt she was not completely alone. That night marked a turning point for both of them. For Maria, it was the moment she realized that her sacrifices had not gone unseen. For Daniel, it was the moment he understood that true leadership was not about profits or prestige, it was about people. The morning after Daniel revealed his true identity, Maria walked into the restaurant with her heart still trembling. She had not slept much. The conversation from the night before replayed in her mind again and again. Every word felt surreal. The trainee she thought she was guiding had turned out to be the owner of the entire restaurant chain. The man who had quietly watched her struggles now stood ready to change her life. She worried, though. Would things really change? Would he truly keep his promises, or had it just been words spoken in the emotion of the moment? Maria was not used to trusting easily. Life had taught her that promises were fragile, and survival came only through her own effort. But as she stepped inside, something felt different. The staff greeted her warmly, as they always did, but she noticed Daniel waiting near the counter, not in disguise this time. He wore a simple but neat suit, his real self revealed to everyone now. The managers and supervisors stood nearby, their faces full of surprise, whispering to one another. News of his true identity had already spread. Daniel gave Maria a reassuring smile, as if to say, I haven't forgotten what I told you. That small gesture calmed her nerves. Later that afternoon, he called a meeting with the staff. Everyone gathered, unsure why the CEO himself had chosen this branch for such a visit. Daniel stood in front of them, his expression serious yet warm. "For weeks, I have worked among you," he began. "I wanted to understand what life is truly like in these restaurants. I wanted to see what challenges you face, what sacrifices you make, and what improvements we need. And what I discovered has changed me." The staff looked at one another curiously. Maria sat in the back, her hands folded tightly, her heart racing. Daniel continued, "I saw dedication, I saw hard work, but I also saw struggles that no one should carry alone. I realized that while our company has grown, we have not always taken care of the people who made that growth possible. That ends today." The room fell silent. Every eye was on him. He went on to announce a series of new policies. Leftover food from every branch would now be donated to shelters and local families in need, ensuring nothing went to waste while people went hungry. Health benefits would be improved for all employees, so no one had to choose between medicine and meals. Scholarships would be introduced for the children of staff members, giving them a chance at education and a brighter future. As the employees broke into murmurs of disbelief and joy, Maria sat frozen. She knew these changes were inspired by her story, though no one else in the room did. Daniel had kept her dignity intact, not exposing her private struggles to the world. Instead, he had turned her pain into a spark that would light hope for many others. After the meeting, he pulled Maria aside quietly. "I told you last night that I would help, and I meant it," he said gently. "I've already arranged for your mother to receive proper medical care. A doctor will visit her tomorrow. And your siblings, they will be enrolled in school with full support." Maria's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not tears of shame or exhaustion. They were tears of relief. For the first time in years, she felt the crushing weight on her shoulders lift slightly. She could breathe. She could imagine a future where survival was not her only goal. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Daniel said softly. "You've already given me something far greater than anything I could give you. You reminded me what leadership truly means. You reminded me what it is to care." From that day forward, Maria's life slowly began to change. Her mother received the treatment she desperately needed, regaining strength little by little. Her siblings, once pale and quiet from hunger, now smiled as they carried schoolbooks instead of empty stomachs. Their small apartment began to feel less like a place of despair and more like a home filled with hope. At work, Maria was recognized not only for her dedication but also for her leadership. Daniel offered her training to grow into a management role, believing her strength and compassion made her a natural leader. Though shy at first, Maria accepted, determined to keep learning and growing. The other employees noticed the changes too. They saw the CEO walking the floors more often, not as a distant figure in an office, but as a man who listened, asked questions, and cared about their lives. The culture of the company began to shift. What once was just a workplace became a community. For Daniel, the journey had transformed him as well. He had entered Undercover as a businessman seeking answers for profit and efficiency. He had emerged as a man humbled by the quiet heroism of one young woman. Maria's story lived in his heart like a reminder every day that success was not measured by wealth alone, but by the lives touched and the burdens lifted. Months later, when the company held its annual gathering, Daniel shared his Undercover experience with the wider team. Without naming Maria, he told the story of a waitress who had taught him more than any boardroom meeting ever could. He spoke of resilience, sacrifice, and love. His words moved the audience deeply, inspiring others to see one another not just as co-workers, but as human beings with unseen battles. Maria sat in the crowd that day, listening quietly, her heart swelling with pride. She knew the story was hers, even if no one else did. And for her, that was enough. Life was not suddenly perfect. Challenges still came, bills still had to be paid, and long hours were still required. But the difference was clear: she no longer faced it all alone. She had support, she had hope, and she had the strength of her own story lifting her higher. And as for Daniel, he never forgot the night he saw a young waitress carefully wrapping leftover bread, carrying it home as if it were treasure. That moment had changed everything for him. It had shown him the value of small acts, the dignity in silent struggles, and the power of compassion to transform not just one life, but many. In the end, what began as a secret mission for a CEO became a journey of the heart. He had set out to discover flaws in his business, but instead, he discovered the greatness of humanity hidden in the quiet corners of his own company. And in Maria, he found not just an employee, but an example of courage that would guide him for the rest of his life.